Hi, this is John, and I'm going to be talking to you about how to process thermal struts using the EPICS Kits and Assemblies features, and particularly talk about a number of improvements that we've made to those features in the last few updates. So first off, what is a thermal strut? Well, there's a picture of one right there. It's basically two or more extruded shapes, extruded components, that are joined together by one or more strips of insulating material. And throughout this presentation, I'll probably be using the brand name Insulbar, but there are a number of manufacturers of these. It's a vinyl or some other plastic strip that is made to fit within a channel that's been made in these other two extruded parts and provides insulation, thermal insulation between the two. So the extruded components, as you see here, they're different finishes. They can be the same finish. They may not be finished. They may be mill finish, whatever. But they don't have to be the same. And as you'll see when we're creating the kit part or the assembly part, that you can determine what components actually get included and what their finish and alloy and so on are. All the components in a strut are typically the same length. If you're making a strut, you're typically putting two extrusions of the same length together with a strip of Insulbar or whatever of the same length, but they don't have to be. But we're going to show you there are some advantages if they do start out the same length, that it's much more flexible from EPICS standpoint when you're entering then orders for that same strut in a different length. So we'll talk about that. And of course, after assembly, you may ship it out the door as it is, or it may be cut or mitered or otherwise fabricated, and then you'll ship it and invoice the customer, or you put it in stock and pull it into your curtain wall line or some other internal process that is working with material that's coming out of EPICS. So, what does a thermal strut part look like? Well, it's an assembly. So, just like other assemblies, we give it a category of assembly in the standard part file. It has a die number of assembly, and then you can fill in other properties as you like. By default, I think EPICS is going to put in an alloy of not applicable, same thing for temper. But in this case, I actually want to tell the customer when I sell this that this is 6063 T5 aluminum. Obviously, the Insulbar is vinyl, but I want to be able to tell the customer on their sales order acknowledgement and on the invoice what alloy and temper it is. You can choose to or not to as you like. And you also notice that the length of this assembly part is 24 feet long. So that is kind of our standard that we create struts with. And so we're going to start with that as our starting point for this part. So now if we click on the components tab for that part, that's where you will actually build what is included in that assembly. So in this case, we have a strip of Insulbar profile A111, and we have a right part and a left part for this strut. Now, obviously, I named these very descriptively, but they would be whatever part number you use internally. They don't have to be named strut. The part number can be anything you like. And as you also notice, all of these are of length 24 foot. That's very important because when you're building an assembly, if you make all the components the same length as the main part, in this case 24 foot, then when you go to enter an order for it, that part length can be changed. So if sometimes these parts are 24 feet, sometimes they're 6 feet, sometimes they're a random length because you're making windows out of them. Maybe you've got a 3'6" and a 4 foot and a 4'5", whatever it may be. But as long as you make the parent part, in this case, this strut 101, the same length as all of its components, then EPICS knows, hey, if one changes, they all have to change. So that's another shortcut that we've added fairly recently, I think in 9.10, to allow for a lot more flexibility when it comes time to order a strut. So what do those components look like? Well, of course, we have a right part, and it has its own die number and alloy and temper and length and so on. You do notice that it is checked off as a stock or component part. That is a requirement if it's going to be used as part of an assembly. We have our Insulbar, which in this case is an accessory. You're not extruding it, you are ordering it and receiving it using the accessory PO and accessory receiver screens. And so that has a category of accessory and a die number of accessory. And you notice alloy is not applicable, temper is not applicable, but you do notice that our length is 24 foot, that when this comes in, we typically order this material at 24 feet long, or we've made it 24 feet long so that it will match up with all of our components that we're joining with this particular profile. And then we have the left part. Again, Has its own die number, alloy, temper, finish. It has a length, again, of 24 foot to match our parent assembly part. Now you do notice that I've highlighted the routing. Now this particular extruded part does have a painted routing. It's being painted white, which is what our Finish 101 is. But the reason I've highlighted it is that is the routing in cases where we are actually shipping this to the customer. Perhaps the customer orders these for spare parts, or we use this for some other purpose. So it is marked with a routing of paint, which does terminate in pack, ship, and invoice. Obviously, if we're generating these for an assembly, we're going to put them into stock so that they can be pulled out to make our assembly. So on the stock tab, you now have a second routing that you can fill in, and that is a stock routing. In this case, it's paint to stock, so that when we are using this as a component of an assembly, we use a different routing, and EPICS will automatically know when it creates that replacement order. Instead of using the paint routing, it will use the paint to stock routing, which is basically order, extrude, and add to stock. So makes it easier now to create those stock replacement orders. You don't have to modify the routing before you post them, which prior to 9.10 you did have to do. So every part, every component part can have, or stock part, can have two different routings, one when it's going to the customer and one when it's going into stock. So then to enter the order for these strut parts, it's very simple. I've selected the same part number for both of these. You notice this is STRUT 101 going to our customer. They've ordered 100 pieces. In one case, they ordered it at 24 foot long, and the next one, it's 18 foot long. And so I have changed the length. As I said before, as long as the length on the strut part matches the length of all of its components, we're good. EPICS will automatically modify the length of all those components. Now, one thing to be aware of, you will notice at the bottom that the units for the pricing now support more than just price per piece. And prior to a fairly recent update, for components, or excuse me, for kits and assemblies, you had to have everything priced by the piece. Now you're not required to do that. So because these are different lengths, I want to make sure that they get priced properly. So because I'm pricing all these components by the pound or by the foot or by the square foot, and converting maybe to a price per piece, these lengths will be taken into account when it does those pricing conversions, and so the pricing will all come out okay. In this case, I'm pricing on Midwest average plus customer's adder, et cetera, et cetera. And again, these prices are just made up, but that's what I'm using for my example. So after you post that assembly order, you just get a standard acknowledgement. And again, it does show me the information that I put on that assembly part. So I did want to show the customer 6063 T5, shows the length, shows the pricing. It's just a standard acknowledgement. There's really nothing unusual about it. And then when I go out and look at that sales order after it's posted, I can now click over on the Components tab, and it shows me more information than it used to about what the status of these components that are needed for this order are. So you see at the bottom, I now have a new tab, and we'll see that in a minute, that shows me the component extrusion status. But right now, let's just see that, well, we've got Insel bar in stock, but we don't have anything in stock for these extruded parts, the right and left strut parts. So we'll need to create those, need to extrude them using an extrusion order. So to do that, we open the stock replacement screen, and this also has a new tab. This extruded kit and assembly components tab has been added in version 9.10, and its only purpose is to go out and find components that are needed for kits and assemblies, extruded components, and display them on screen if they don't already have a stock replacement job. So in this case, it found both those items, my 18-foot and 24-foot struts, and has found for item 1 it needs rights and lefts, and for item 2 it needs rights and lefts, and it needs 100 pieces of each. At this point, I can change the order quantity if I need to. If maybe I had half of it in stock, I don't have to take the full amount. But at whatever point, I can then click Create Extrusion Sales Order. Now you notice at the top, I have a bill to and a ship to, and that has defaulted to what I have configured on the EPICS configuration screen as my customer that I use for stock replacement orders. This is an internal order. I'm producing it and putting in stock for Worldwide Extrusions, which is my internal company name. Or maybe you create one for your fab department or for your window line or whatever. In any case, this is different from shipping to the customer. And by setting this Worldwide as my default customer for billing and shipping replacement orders, stock replacement orders, that customer can order absolutely any part or any die in the system. So you don't have to worry about who owns the die or who owns the parts, that we're creating parts for this customer or that customer. EPICS will allow this customer that you have designated as the destination for stock replacement orders can order any part or any die in the system. So once I'm ready to create that extrusion order, I simply create the button, click the button, and I get the standard message that you'll see on this screen, which just tells me that it has created the sales order, and I can open the order entry screen to edit it. So if I do need to change a quantity or I need to change something else about this particular order, I can do that. Or I can just simply go straight there and post the order, which is what I'm going to do. Everything's the way I want it. And so now I have a new screenshot of the assembly order. And you'll see at the bottom now, because I've created my stock replacement order, I now have the component, the extruded components listed down below. It shows me the sales order they've been assigned to. It shows me all the details, or enough of the details. I can right click on the item and go see even more details. But shows me that it has been ordered, nothing has been extruded, nothing has been stocked. So in addition to seeing here that I need 100 pieces, I can see, all right, well, there's 100 pieces in process, but they have not yet been extruded. So now they've extruded the first item, and I see that I have 104 pieces that have been extruded. Nothing's been stocked yet. So again, I can constantly return to this screen. So maybe your scheduler for your assembly department from the schedule screen can right-click and drill down to each of the items to see when they're actually going to be ready, because obviously you don't want to start assembly until all the components are available. Or you could have a report that does the same thing. So now they've extruded both items, and they've put at least one of them into stock. So we have 104 pieces in stock of our right strut. And you notice up above here, then under kit and assembly components, it does show 104 pieces in stock for that component. So previously you had a little dilemma here, because just because it had been put into stock, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get to it first. If it's a popular shape and it was put into stock, maybe somebody else has gone out and grabbed it for their order. Well, that has now changed also in version 9.10 and above. Stock that is generated as replacement stock for kits and assemblies is automatically pre-allocated to the order that generated that replacement order. So in this case, order 13334 is the only order that can pull this material. And if we look at it in our stock inventory screen, you'll see that it has actually been pre-allocated to that item. And that means that only that order has the ability to fill from stock from this particular inventory record. It's not visible to anybody filling any other order. Now, if you need to, you can deallocate it and make it available again if something happens and it turns out we don't need it for this order, or this order gets closed, in which case it gets automatically deallocated. But that is a feature now that will prevent somebody else from taking this material, or another order from taking this material that is needed for this kit or assembly. Now, in version 9.10 and above, it is also possible to manually pre-allocate any order, stock to any order from the from the fill from stock screen. That's kind of a subject for another video, but actually the help page for the fill from stock screen in EPICS gives a very good description of how to pre-allocate and manage orders that have been pre-allocated. So another feature that is useful not just under kits and assemblies. So then when we get ready to post assembly, now that we know that all of our components are there, so we've pulled up our strut department, and we see that our stock pieces are all there for our 3 components. And so we can open the fill from stock screen directly from here while we're adding our production record. And it will then step through component by component. So here's component number 1. We need 100 pieces of our insole bar shape. We needed 100 pieces of our right strut. And we needed 100 pieces of our left strut. And so after we're doing that, we return back to the production screen, post the number of actual good assemblies that we've created, and save our record. And that's it. At that point, then we can move to packing whenever it's ready for packing. And again, select our sales order number, select our quantity, and I'm going to print 10 bundles of 10 pieces each. But there you see that everything is there as you'd expect. We have the shipping screen, and again, I created 10 bundles of 10 pieces each. I simply create a shipping manifest for all of those pieces. And invoicing is just like you'd expect as well. We go to the invoicing screen, we click Find Manifests, or we key in the manifest number, and it generates the invoice, again, using the pricing that came from the assembly part. So once it's packed, it's shipped and invoiced just like anything else in EPICS. So that's it. That's really all I was going to show you today. I'd be happy to take questions if you're watching this live, or send us an email at any time, or a help ticket. And again, the EPICS help file is a very good source of information for all of these features that I've shown you. Thank you for your time.